This is the new electric Abarth 500e, and the story about how it got here is a very long one, so I'm going to give you the abridged version really quick. Almost 90 years ago, and that's 90, Fiat released the 500 Topolino city car, and it eventually spawned the new 500 in 1957 that went on to become one of motoring's most iconic cars. Around that time, a guy named Carlos Abarth, who'd been building fast road and race cars, started to remanufacture 500s under the Abarth name. Then in the 1970s, Fiat buys Abarth, but Fiat discontinues the 500 and eventually puts the Abarth brand on ice. Then after a 3-decade hiatus, a new 500 arrives in 2004 that we know and love today. And thus starts a prosperous era of myriad 500 and Abarth versions, and Fiat and Abarth get bought by Stellantis. Fiat releases an electric 500 in the US in 2013, but it's really the arrival of the new 500e electric in 2020 that brings us to today. The arrival of this new electric Abarth 500e coincides with news that Stellantis is going to axe all internal combustion 500s and Abarths from mid-year this year. Needless to say, it's a significant turning point in this breed's and its ancestors' near century-long history. With new electric cars lobbying left, right and centre, why should you care about the Abarth 500e? Well, few of them have a storied history and a pedigree really to match this particular new electric car. And as we're going to find out, it's really going to need to tap into that history and pedigree to win over EV buyers. There are strong signs that the EV world is moving on for the ballooning arms race of power, weight and excess. And it's moving to a more grown-up place of more modest electric cars for more modest buyer means and budgets. The ground floor for electric car ownership starts in the high $30,000 mark, but at 60 grand you can start to get some properly nice stuff, such as the Abarth 500e. It starts at $58,900 for this Turismo version, or $60,500 for this Scorpionisma, the fancy one. That puts the electrified Italian directly up against the likes of the super popular Tesla Model 3 and the super quick MG4 X-Power. So it will have its work cut out swooning EV buyers, and for a number of reasons. Let's cover those off. Clearly, the 500 breed is not big on size, and that means you've kind of got limited practicality. And by EV measures, it's not terribly big on power, so it's not big on performance either. And on top of that, quite significantly, it's not terribly big on range, but more on that later. Chasing cars. Honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
However, for its on-paper shortcomings, this 500e absolutely oozes style and charisma, particularly in this acid green paintwork, which does command more than $1,000 of upcharge. And by that, I mean it's $990 for the paint and a bit of extra money for the polarized sunglasses that you're going to have to wear when you're anywhere in its postcode. Styling-wise, the differences over the regular 500e include a specific front fascia with its own specific splitter and unique side skirts. And you also get these very fetching diamond-cut 18-inch wheels that are finished in titanium grey, much like the mirror caps. Both versions get dual Abarth logos on the nose in case you're a little unsure about what you're looking at, and the version that is difficult to pronounce gets another logo on the side. At the rear, you get a specific rear diffuser, and even more Abarth and Scorpion logos on the tail and on the rear quarter panels. Less conspicuous is that the Abarth version is 30mm longer than the regular 500e. More significant is that it's 60mm wider in track and 24mm longer in wheelbase than the internal combustion version that it's going to replace. Of course, this is based on the new Fiat 500e, so the platform is said to be 96% new. So it is longer and larger, but at just 3.7 meters in length, larger blokes might end up wearing this like a slim-fitting mankini.
Very nice.
Speaking of which, how about we try it on for size and check out the interior? Despite the modest size, the 500 and its Abarth extrapolations have long been actually quite well packaged. It does maximize space in here pretty well, so you do actually get a surprisingly airy ambience, at least in the first row. The blackout theme in here actually works a charm, and you get lashings of Alcantara across the dash fascia, on the wheel and on the seats. The vibe is fairly retro, quite upmarket and reasonably racy, and the blackout effect does make a stunning contrast to the dazzling retina-burning paintwork on the outside. The seats themselves are heavily bolstered and quite purposeful and include lots of little acid green stitching and these nice little Abarth logos. But they are quite flat backed, and these bolsters don't really hold your body upright quite as assertively as you might hope. They're heated but not cooled and mechanically adjustable, which might seem a bit rich at this price point, but it does sort of fit its boy and girl racer vibe. It's worth noting that this entry Turismo version in Australia is actually a high-spec version offered in overseas markets. In Europe, they offer a cheaper base 500e, which gets cloth trim and 17-inch wheels, and you can also get a cabrio version over there that's not currently offered in Australia. It's claimed that this steering wheel was inspired by both a Scorpion's claw and classic 3-spoke wheel designs of rally cars of the 1970s, but I can't really see that no matter how hard I squint. Whatever the case, it's comfy, it's grippy, and it offers an unfettered view of the 7-inch TFT digital driver screen, which is really colourful and sharp. I do like the fact that it's neat, relatively uncomplicated, and fairly straightforward here, which includes the 10.25-inch media system, which uses Uconnect 5 operating system. It's quite sharp, but it can be a little bit slow on the uptake in operation. But it does offer wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it gets its own proprietary sat-nav, which can be mirrored into the 7-inch driver screen. Below it is an inductive charge pad, which actually has an embossed map of Turin on its surface, which is the hometown of Fiat. You get nice physical HVAC controls like you would expect to find in cars for grown-ups, and below that is a nice simple large drive selector. It's refreshingly more conventional than some of its rivals, definitely more upmarketed here than an MG4, and less of that techno weirdburgerism that you do find in Tesla Model 3. Sound ergonomics have always been a little bit of a challenge for the 500 breed, but this new version sort of removes pretty much all of that weird sort of hunched over effect that you used to have in the older Abarths. But it's not without its quirks and bugbears. The big issue is foot space in the wheel well, because you really have to jam your left foot between the brake pedal and the center console trim, and it's really not ideal. Some of it must be a hangover from right-hand drive, because the passenger side footwell has plenty of space for both feet. Then there's a glass roof, so you get this sort of flimsy semi-transparent mesh that really doesn't do a lot for stopping the sunlight beaming through on a hot summer day, particularly if you're parked up while recharging at a fast charger. These hard, shiny door cards really aren't fitting for a car with a 60k price tag, and do make a really strange contrast to the Alcantara on the dash. And you do get this dinky little center console bin with only one cup holder buried deep down below that has to sit next to your keys and your wallet. Needless to say, storage isn't a strong point in this car, but given its size and compact nature, that's probably reasonably excusable. Right, let's check out row 2. Let me out. I don't like it. Boot space is a modest 185 litres, which is pretty small but not terribly bad for a city car less than 3.7 metres in length. Also found on the weekend shop that you can flip the rears forward, liberating fairly significant luggage space. You also get a goo pack, and of course have to cater for the charging cables that take up most of the floor. Realistically, it's good for a couple of luggage cases and a couple of helmets and other addenda if you're thinking on going on a bit of a road trip or cranking out a few hot laps. But that does come with some compromises, and we're about to find out why. On road, there's a lot to unpack for such a little car. I'm going to start with a proposition, and I've discovered that many of my colleagues don't necessarily agree with me. I reckon the motor is at the wrong end of the car. You see, the classic iconic Cinquecento was rear engine and rear wheel drive. So when the new 500 arrived in 2004 for the new millennia, it went front wheel drive, which was in step with the times. But fast forward 2 decades, and there seems to be a rear drive renaissance when it comes to electric cars. Given the heritage that this car taps very hard, and it's largely a new platform, I really think that's a bit of a missed trick. So while other single motor EVs like the MG4 and the Cupra Born get thrust from behind, the Abarth 500e gets pulled from the nose. Doing the dragging is a single motor rated at 113.7, or 113 for the adults, and 235 Newton meters of torque. That's about 4 times the amount of power and 4 times the amount of torque than the original classic Abarth 695 SS. But it's a pretty small swing when it comes to a modern EV punch-up. It's mated to a 42 kilowatt battery, which is 37.8 kilowatt hours usable in a 400 volt architecture. Driven through a single reduction drive via the front wheels, it's claimed that the Abarth 500e will sprint to 100 kilometers an hour from a standstill in 7 seconds flat. Well, a thunderous performer, it certainly isn't. So that kind of performance is about on par with your entry-level single motor MG4. But when you compare the MG4 X-Power, the ones for similar money, that car can hit 100 kilometers an hour in 3.6 seconds, or half the time. And yet by the seat of the pants, the Abarth feels very fit and very punchy. Now, Abarth makes all sorts of claims about how this electric version is much quicker than the internal combustion models that it offers. But the crux of it is that the low-down instant electric torque makes this car feel, by the seat of the pants, a lot quicker than it actually is. That's even in Turismo mode, which is what we're in at the moment, which knocks power back to 100 kilowatts and torque back to 200 newton meters. And it brings with it a nice soft pliable throttle response, which is ideal for low-speed urban driving. In this mode, it's a punchy and cooperative commuter that's really ideal for punching holes in the urban jungle, even if that comes with a strong one-pedal effect that really can't be tamed or adjusted. You can switch up to Scorpio Road or Scorpio Track Drive modes, which unleashes full power and full torque. And the only real difference between those two is that with the track mode, it basically defeats the one pedal effect. Both of those modes really sharpen the car and up the response. And each mode really does fit the labeling that's on the box. All in all, this format is simple, straightforward, and no mucking about. Problem is that for my money, either of those Scorpio modes make throttle response so sharp that it's just too uncomfortable for urban driving. And if there's any real gripe here, it's the lack of customization and that you can't get that nice soft throttle response of Turismo and dial back the one pedal mode if that's what you prefer. Then there's a sound generator that activates a fake exhaust sound of an Abarth using its famed record Monza exhaust system. You do have to stop the car and dig through sub-menus to activate the sound generator, but the Magic of Television will activate it right now. It does sound rich and thrummy, like you'd expect from a tuned little petrol engine. It sounds beaut and it does bring an extra sense of occasion. However, what it doesn't do is it doesn't fake gear shifts like you will find in Hyundai's Ioniq 5N. So while it sounds great, once you get up to a constant speed, it kind of just sits there humming along at 1 RPM point, much like a CVT. And that can get pretty annoying after a while. Of course, fake gear shifts mean more complexity, and that's not really what this car is about. Instead, it feels like just a big one-speed electric go-kart, particularly once you turn the sound generator off. One of the other limitations of the package is that its maximum velocity is capped at 150 kilometers an hour, despite what the speedometer tells you. So if you are going to hit a racetrack, you probably want to choose one with lots of corners and not a lot of long straights. And that's because this hot hatch absolutely loves corners. The steering and the chassis are really, really good, really, really well sorted. The front end is sharp and accurate, and it just feels really, really nimble, but not to the point of being nervous. Some of that is chassis tuning and tyre choice, but a lot of that has to do with the wider track and the short wheelbase. But a lot of this car's lightning reactions has a lot to do with its weight. In fact, it's so nimble and lively, even at urban speeds, that I can now see why Abarth stuck with front wheel drive. The front wheels really get their torque down without much fuss, and there's not a lot of torque steer. It just sort of knuckles down and just rockets away. Yeah, the ride comfort is quite firm, but it is incredibly well sorted and very compliant, much more so than the super rigid petrol Abarths that I've driven in days gone by. Now, everyone's tastes are different. Some people like that really rigid Abarth convention, but for my money, the compliance that this car has makes it just really cooperative and friendly and nice to live with around town. Its small size makes it easy to place and park, and the big glass area makes outward visibility utterly fantastic. But there's a catch, and for my money, it's a big one. Lightweight means a modest battery, so outright range is just 253 kilometers WLTP. So weekend trips and racetrack blats will require careful forethought. But there are deeper and more subversive shortcomings than simply having to plug it in twice as often as the leading lights offering 500 k's of range. I have found that a more rapidly depleting battery does exacerbate range anxiety. Hit 20% of battery charge and your opportunities to find a working and accessible fast charger is half of that of a more grown-up EV. So you're kind of forced to treat recharging more conservatively and recharge more often. At its 85 kilowatt peak DC charge, a 20 to 80% charge is going to take about 25 minutes. But a 20 to 100% charge is going to be 1 hour and 20 minutes. And for reason of practicality, you will be compelled to go for the shorter recharge. So what conclusions can we draw from this? Well, given the unreliable state of public DC fast charging, it really is essential that you buy a 3-phase wall box and plug this in overnight every night. Warranty is a slim 3 years and 150,000 kilometers, which is really scraping the bottom of the barrel now in 2024. More normalized and acceptable is servicing, which is every 12 months, 15,000 kilometers at $300 per pop. Confession time. I'm really very smitten by the Abarth 500e Turismo. I like the pocket rocket size, the retro tinge vibe, and I do like the conventional styling and design. Around town, it's as quick as it needs to be, and its fun-filled chassis really delivers both around town or out on a country road at speeds that won't threaten your license. While there are quicker and slicker alternatives out there, that's really not the point of the Abarth 500e experience, and it's long been the mantra for the 500 breed throughout its history. However, for me, there are two major shortcomings, and the first one is about 10 grand more expensive than it should be. Despite the fun factor and the charm, 60k really is a lot of coin for the modest high voltage architecture that's under the skin. But secondly, the modest range really is the main anchor point for me. It really deserves a higher, denser battery, and one that's no larger or heavier than the one it's got that might otherwise spoil its handling, and one that pushes range up towards the high 300s or over the 400 kilometre mark. And it's only then when you can really venture outside of the urban environment and go for lengthy trips in the countryside or go for long track days. Really, more fun factor, more pace, and even more around town manners is not what this car needs. Instead, it just needs to offer a less stressful experience when it comes to the topic of range and recharging, so you can enjoy the virtues that it absolutely has. All in all, it's a first great effort for what is a new EV fun machine, but there's plenty of opportunity for improvement here as Abarth heads off into its brand new electric era. Maybe those improvements will come in the first facelift. So that's what I think, but how about you? Put your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe while you're at it, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.